Fencing is described by some as combat in ballet. Others call it physical chess. Sword in hand and clad in white, two combatants face each other and fight at close quarters. Fencing is a combination of motion and stillness, firmness and tenderness, wit and bravery. The light foil, the fierce épée, the saber combining slash and thrust. These are the three forms of Olympic fencing. Around the world, people are fascinated by the legendary story of the swordsman Zorro. In China, the sword is hailed as the king of knives. In history, Shang Zhuang and Lady Gongsheng were both masters of the sword. The medieval knights of Europe, for whom the sword was the embodiment of honor and godliness, were for a time considered invincible. The first book on swordsmanship was published in Spain, The Cradle of Fencing. At one time, fencing was a simple and honorable way for members of high society to resolve disputes. In their vanity, aristocrats would fight each other with swords, often over some trifling matter. During the 20 years from 1588 to 1608, it's recorded that 8,000 nobles were killed in duels in Paris alone. Subsequently, laws were introduced across Europe aimed at preventing such a waste of life. Eventually, fencing became a sport. The creator of the modern Olympic Games, Pierre de Coubertin, was himself a fine fencer. The foil and saber were included as formal events in the first modern Olympics in 1896. Ideally, a sword should act as an extension of the arm. However, if the sword is too long, the moment of inertia is increased and thus the fence's movement is impaired. Generally, a sword that's 90 centimeters long is considered most suitable. From the straight lunge, disengagement, change of engagement and whip-over, to the press, coulée, counterbeat and counterattack, and the thrown thrust, cut, forehand cut, backhand cut, swordsmanship has developed a great deal in the course of several centuries. However, whatever the style or technique, the objective remains the same: to strike one's opponent without being struck oneself. In attack, the sword should accelerate along the shortest route towards the target. In defense, a parry with the sword or glove can change the course of the opponent's sword, or the fencer can simply retreat from the attack radius. The tip of the sword moves in a straight line, along an arc, or in a spiral movement. The blades of the swords, in constantly joining, crossing, and parting, form different kinds of levers. It's almost impossible to carry out an attack that's both fast and accurate. All in all, fencers need a subtle sense of timing, distance, and space, combined with a delicate sword sense. Because of this, height and strength are not necessarily an advantage for a fencer. The invention of the fencing mask by the Frenchman Labossière in 1776 was a milestone in the history of fencing. At the 1982 Fencing World Championships, however, Soviet foil champion Vladimir Smirnov died after his opponent's sword penetrated his mask. This accident gave rise to a close examination of the safety of protective masks. Today, fencing masks are made of high-intensity, lightweight wire. The mask weighs no more than 2 kilograms, has mesh with a size no greater than 2.1 millimeters, and is able to withstand 160 kilograms of pressure. As such, it's able to guarantee the safety of the fencer's head and face. The problem is that the fencer feels like he's looking through some sort of screen, and spectators find the fencers impersonal. Moreover, the fencer is unable to see the eyes and expression of his opponent. Experienced soldiers know that an enemy's eyes and expression can reveal and transmit their intentions. However, The fencing mask blocks this window on the soul. Recently, a transparent plastic mask has been developed, which has already been adopted in official competitions. It allows the fencers and the audience to observe the eye expression, which used to be hidden behind the Iron Curtain. At the Paris Olympics of 1924, a Hungarian referee and a member of the Italian fencing team settled a scoring dispute with a duel. In those years, being a fencing referee was considered a high-risk profession. The thin tip and high speed of the blade, the variety of movements, and small scale of the scoring area made it very difficult to judge using the naked eye. At the 1934 European Fencing Championships held in Budapest, electronic scoring was first introduced in the épée competition. At the 1955 Fencing World Championships held in Rome and the Melbourne 1956 Olympic Games, electronic scoring was officially introduced in the foil event. It wasn't until the 1985 Fencing World Championships in France that electronic scoring was adopted for the saber event. The foil, épée, and saber employ different equipment and different rules. The design of the electronic scoring systems for the three is also different, although the principle is essentially the same. There are three cables in a fencer's sword, the equivalent of a live wire, a neutral wire, and an earth. These three wires, which are connected to a body wire and hence to long tractable cables and a wire drum, eventually lead to a box forming an electric circuit. The electronic tip of the foil is a cylindrical spring button requiring 0.5 kilograms of pressure to depress. When the tip touches a valid target on the opponent's lamé or jacket and the button is pressed, the circuit is broken and the touch is thus registered. Since the épée, the valid target, is the entire body, the starting pressure of the button is 0.75 kilograms. When a touch is scored, the disconnected circuit is switched on. Any touch on the metal piece, which is connected to the ground wire in the sword, will not register any score in the box. At the Montreal Olympics in 1976, Boris Onyshenko from the Soviet Union, competing in the épée event, secretly tampered with the circuit so that he could remote control the box by pressing the engine on the sword with his little finger. This was one of the biggest scandals in the whole history of the Olympic Games. Today, the automatic scoring system in fencing has been vastly improved, with the design of the circuits becoming simpler and more delicate. However, the cables, by following the fencer as he advanced and retreated, left a long tail, which was always considered an encumbrance, or at least a distraction. At the Athens Olympics in 2004, this tail was finally got rid of. The fencers instead wore a transmitter the size of a cigarette pack, which transmitted a wireless signal to the officials. The fencers were thus liberated. The introduction of instant replays further reduced the chances of an error of judgment. However, there are some people who complain that the adoption of electronic scoring will result in the degradation of fencing. They argue that the fencer's focus is shifting from the quality of their movement to the need to score.